Hi, it's Fatima Madlan. Today I'm going to talk about should the government balance its budget? Well, first of all, we should know what's budget. The government budget is a document presenting anticipated tax revenues, inheritance tax, income tax, corporation tax, import taxes, and proposed spending expenditure, healthcare, education, defense, roads, state benefits for the year to come. The budget is often presented to the legislature and must be approved by the legislature in most parliamentary systems. With this budget, the government implements economic policy and realizes its program priorities. After the budget is approved, the government ministries, and other organizations can decide how the funds from individual chapters should be used. Taxes, customs duties, fees, and other revenues make up most of the revenue of the state budget. According to the Constitution or by law, state budget expenditures cover the activities of the state. Legislation is still needed to appropriate funds for government programs since the budget alone doesn't allocate funding. And there's a quote by Barack Obama. Budget is more than just a series of numbers on a page. It is an embodiment of our values. And what's balanced budget? Well, balanced budget financial plans have revenues equal to expenditures, so there is no deficit or surplus. Balanced budgets are generally used to describe budgets for the government agencies. However, they may apply to an organization that incurs operating revenues and incurs operating expenses. In addition to the term balanced budget, indicating a budget that posts both surpluses and deficits at the same time. It can also mean a budget that posts a surplus without a deficit at the same time. Therefore, revenues may exceed expenses in a balanced budget, but not the other way around. Well, objectives of the government budget. Resource allocation. It helps to distribute resources according to the country's social and economic advantages. Factors influencing resource allocation include government allowances and tax concessions, direct production of services and goods, reduce income and wealth inequality, stabilize the economy, managing public enterprises, economic growth, and reduce regional differences. First, government allowances and tax concessions. The government offers allowances and tax concessions to manufacturers to encourage investment. Direct production of services and goods. The government can take over production directly if private sector interest isn't shown. Reduce income and wealth inequality. In an economic system, income and wealth inequality are important elements. In order to create equality, the government imposes a tax on the elite class and spends more on the poor. Stabilize the economy. To keep the economy stable, the budget can also be used to avoid business fluctuations. In deflation and inflation, deficit and excess budgets help to balance the prices in the economy. Managing public enterprises. Many public sector industries exist primarily for the benefit of the people. There are several provisions planned for operating such a business and providing financial assistance. Economic growth. Investing and saving are two variables that determine a country's seat. Therefore, the budgetary plan focuses on preparing adequate resources to invest in the public sector and to increase the investment and savings rate overall. Reduce regional differences. It seeks to reduce regional inequalities through a tax and expenditure policy, as well as promoting investment in underdeveloped regions. Well, now the main question. Should the government balance its budget? Well, for me, this is a very tricky question. From a finance view, it's a good to balance the budget. You shouldn't spend more than you make. However, for a country, it's a different issue. Sometimes a lot of spending can avoid social security, unemployment, and things like this. And the spending may over what you make. As a result, deficit is happening. In the US, there are two ways to balance its budget: collect more or cut the spending. Cut the spending means people get less benefit, there will be less federal employees to do work. As a result, it may not be benefit in the long run. On the other hand, collecting more means more tax. It applies to both personal and business. At the end, it may slow the economy to grow. It's not easy to balance its budget, but continuously to increase deficit is the worst. Now the US is in debt and most of this payment goes to the interest. The federal government should do its best to decrease its deficit. I mean spending less in defense or joining another war. And back to the question, it's good to balance its budget, but it shouldn't require to always. Sometimes deficit may benefit in the long term. Avoid increasing tax to businesses may help them to develop more projects and ending up helping the economy. Future generations have rights to government spending beyond have rights to like government spending beyond the limits of tax revenue requires borrowing. The borrowing is funded by domestic investors, private foreign investors, and other nations wishing to invest surplus funds. These investors require a return. They require governments wishing to borrow to promise them some of a country's future tax revenue. However, future taxpayers have no vote in that decision. Therefore, the process of government borrowing for a period longer than the usual term of government is less democratic than a balanced budget. Given most government borrowing is in fact for longer than average lifetimes, or in some cases indefinitely, such with a certain United Kingdom government debts. So the futures called democratic citizens who fund the investors in government debt have no say, no vote, no bearing at all on the portion of their expenditure. Now we are in the 3-2-1 style. First of all, three things I learned. Well, first, the spending elsewhere can increase if interest repayments are reduced. Due to this, we can look to spend more money on useful areas such as education, healthcare, and repair of infrastructure in the country, rather than paying others back for debt the government has taken on. As a result, the government spending can rise. Secondly, poor budget management can negatively impact the economy and its citizens, resulting in things such as stock market crashes, unemployment, unstable housing markets, and healthcare, among many other things. Third and lastly, if consumers spend more to offset government spending and borrowing, interest rates may rise. Now, two things I will apply to my life. Well, I will pay taxes and bills, my tax and bills at the right time, and I will never avoid them to help my government's budget management. And secondly, if I will work in the government, then I will increase few significant taxes if my country is struggling to manage its budget. And the one thing I will explore more about. There are the plethora of things I would like to explore more about. However, the most vital one is the chain reaction. I would like to learn about it more because it sounds like an interesting topic to me. It includes some necessary things such as labor productivity, wages, and production of goods and services. And these are my references. And thanks for your attention.